Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Guess That Record. I am your host, Jackson Reed. I want to once again thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. The show is nothing without the listeners, so thanks again for being here with us. This is the show where we talk about music and try to figure out which album I pulled from my collection. I'm so excited to be talking with this week's guest. He is a former goaltender who played for 15 years in the National Hockey League, spending that time with the New York Islanders, Los Angeles Kings, and San Jose Sharks. His career highlights include his then record-setting 73-save performance for the Islanders in the 1987 playoffs and helping the Kings reach the Stanley Cup final in 1993. Since retiring from playing, he has worked as a broadcaster. He is currently with Sportsnet, where he is an in-studio analyst on Hockey Night in Canada and a color commentator for the Calgary Flames. It is an honor to welcome Kelly Hrudey to Guess That Record. How are things going, Kelly?
Well, I'm quite nervous, Jackson. Thanks for the invite. I got the invite about a month and a half ago, and thanks for reaching out. I love music, but I'm quite nervous. I told my wife today when I was leaving that I'm really nervous because I know your love of music and your recording and so on, and I feel like I've forgotten a lot of the stuff about my youth and the music I used to love, and my dad, it sort of got me started in my love of music and so on around the house, and then family gatherings. We played a lot of music. We didn't actually play the instruments, but we listened to a lot of music, and so I'm finally here and super excited, but I know I'm going to do poorly.
Well, I always make sure that the guest does well. So
okay.
Yeah. It's great to be talking with you live and in person today.
Thank you.
We're recording at the library here at Mount Royal University in Calgary. I'm a former student, so it's good to be back here.
Right, nice.
And it's awesome to have you on the show for two big reasons. One, you're the first guest that we've had on the show that doesn't come from a musical background.
Right.
Which I think is good because, this show is all about being a fan of music.
Sure.
And it's good to talk with musicians and people in the business, but I also think it's good to get sort of a different perspective on it from people that are sort of outside of the world of it. So,
right. I'd just like to say you're exactly right. I don't play, but music has been a big part of my life. And so when I was a kid, I was born in 1961. And as I said, there's music around the house, and I started really fall in love with it, and all sorts of different kinds. Like my dad loved classical. He had a violin that he'd play around the house. Then he sort of went into a little bit. He liked a little bit of country. He liked Liberace. And then when we'd go to family gatherings, there'd be like Simon and Garfunkel. There'd be my uncle loved Charlie Pride. And so there's all sorts of different things around. And I fell in love with Queen early on and so on. So, yeah, and just so people know, my love for music, when I would be on NHL Charter playing many years ago when I was playing, and there'd be card games going on and everything, I would have my music, and I'd sit in my seat for 3-4 hours, however long the plane was, and I'd listen to music the entire time. So that's the sort of stronghold it has on me.
Yeah. And the other reason I'm happy to have you here is because you're the first guest we've had on the show that has a song specifically written about you. I got to say it now. Hrudey is on duty here at Guess That Record, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
So for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, back when Kelly was with the LA Kings, they came up with a song called Hrudey's on Duty. That's all about how great of a goalie Kelly is. I had never heard the song until they played it on a Flames game this year. Yeah. And I was like, oh, man, I got to search this thing up. I did some research, and it looks like it was created by the LA radio station Pirate Radio 100.3 FM in 1989.
Well, it was that's, I think, where it was first played.
Yeah.
But it was written by a guy by the name of Harry Perzigian. Now, Harry... He turned out to be a friend of mine years later.
Right.
He went by the name, he was a songwriter, Harry Paris, I believe. And so he wrote a number of songs that made it pretty big. But it was like the hair bands and that kind of stuff, more heavy metal type things. Harry was a really terrific guy, and unfortunately we lost him just a few years ago. But yeah, it was strange to sort of meet him. He was a super... You see exactly what he looks like in the video, right?
Yeah.
And he had front row seats in the Great Western Forum in the second period. I would be in that And he would just be yelling my name and everything. And for the first while, Jackson, I thought he hated me because he was so loud. I thought he was screaming obscenities at me, but he was just such a great fan.
Right.
And as I mentioned, we got to know each other later. And he showed me some really cool adventures. Like he would go into songwriting sessions. Do you remember a guy by the name of John Wetton? He was, their band was called Asia, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And so going into the recording session with him, and there are other big artists around, it was really cool. I mean, I love music, and I've been to many concerts and great experiences, but to be in the recording studio with a guy as accomplished as John Wetton, and to hear his voice and everything, it was just, it was amazing.
Was there any other like cool stuff you got to do with Harry there?
I sat in a lot of his writing sessions. So he would do all sorts of writing things with rhymes and just all over and over and over. And he'd give me all these ideas about songs he has. And I would go to his apartment for a few hours and it was a great learning experience for me because I never really knew how you craft a song.
Right.
And I didn't know about the rhyming and all these different things and all the different tools he had. He was very dedicated to the craft, of course.
And then, so going back to the song that's all about you, I was wondering, like, what would like Wayne and the guys on the team would have thought about that?
Oh my gosh, they teased me like crazy because it's kind of a odd looking video but it was so cool because that's when cassette tapes were out, and so we had it on a cassette tape. And my kids were super young at that age. I'm going to say ballpark. I think we only had 2 kids at the time, and Jessica and Megan might have been 5 and 2 or something. And so they'd put that on the stereo all the time and play it, and they'd dance and things like that. So I was quite embarrassed around the guys with that song, but my kids loved it, and so I loved it, right?
That's good, yeah. And it's sort of funny because, like, it kind of follows this trend in the 80s to have songs about sports teams because you got, like, the Chicago Bears doing the Super Bowl
Yeah, sure,
shuffle,
right, okay.
The LA Rams did a song, New York Mets did a song, and sort of more related to us, the Calgary Flames did
exactly.
a song.
I remember that.
Yeah, and that video is something else.
Yes, it is something else.
And since you've kind of experienced that yourself, I have to imagine, like, with the video that the Flames did, like you got Lanny McDonald and Mike Vernon in there, and all the guys in the video probably thought, like, we'll just do it quick.
Yes.
It'll be on TV once, and no one will ever see it again.
Right.
But now it's on YouTube all these years later. Yeah.
I would have been aghast because I have no rhythm, right? So I can't dance. And, there's a couple pictures where the guys are trying to groove, and I could not do that. I can't quite remember the Flames video, but I would have definitely been the guy in the background and hoping that the camera didn't pick me up or anything, because that would have been it would have been so nerve-wracking for me. I would have been so embarrassed to be in that video.
Yeah. I think Mike Vernon does a great job in his little part there. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to have to look at it tonight when I get home.
Yeah. So you're originally from Edmonton.
Yep.
You now live in Calgary. How long have you been here?
Well, when we were playing in LA in the early 90s, you start to think about retirement and where you might want to live. And my wife and I kind of had some ideas. We kind of thought maybe about British Columbia. We kind of tossed around the idea about Vancouver or maybe the Okanagan. But then it really occurred to us rather quickly that we're both Albertans. Donna is basically from Medicine Hat. She grew up in Saskatchewan, but I met her in Medicine Hat playing junior. And I'm from Edmonton, of course, as you mentioned. And so we kind of thought Calgary would be a perfect place right in the middle so we could visit our families, right? So, and it turned out to be a great thing. So in 1992, we bought some land here. It took us about a year to come up with some plans, and we built, and it was done in 94. So even though I had a bunch of years left in National Hockey League, we knew we were coming to live back here in Calgary.
Okay, yeah. And you've been broadcasting ever since you retired. Just to clarify, though, how long have you been with Sportsnet now?
Sportsnet since the summer of 2014.
Okay.
When they signed the new contract with the NHL.
Right. And you started doing the Flames games around that time?
That's right.
Yeah.
I was doing exclusively Hockey Night in Canada, and then it was actually just before I went to Sochi in 2014 for the Olympics, and I got a call from the head of Sportsnet, Scott Moore, and he asked me if I'd be interested in doing the Flames and Hockey Night in Canada. And he said, go to Sochi, think about it, and you tell me how busy you want to be. Right. So I chose both jobs, and I'm happy I did it. I'm just thrilled doing both. They're entirely different, as you know, Jackson, doing studio work and play-by-play or color. Entirely different, even though you're talking about hockey and you're trying to dissect a game, it's just different.
Had you ever done like color commentary before?
Yeah, I had. And so my first 3 years with Hockey Night in Canada, starting in 1998, I was doing Saturday nights on Hockey Night as a studio analyst. And then we had our executive producer at the time, John Shannon. Mm-hmm. And John wanted me to sort of round out my broadcasting. So he had me doing color on certain events. We had a bunch of Monday night games back then. We had a bunch of Thursday night specials. And so I was doing those, and I went back through my notes. I kept all my notes from those games. I think I did something like 30 games color analyst back early in my broadcasting career, and then not again until 2012. And so I was sort of put in a different role for 2 years, and it was actually a nice step for me to relearn how to do color and also to add that to my resume when Sportsnet came again in 2014.
Right. And I'll just put it out there now so that everyone knows I am very biased, but I'm a huge Flames fan.
Cool.
I have my own tickets. Flames
nice.
Flames fan until I die.
Okay.
So because of that, I hear you and Rick Ball calling games all the time. Yeah. And I don't really watch other teams, honestly, so I don't hear a lot of other broadcasters. But from what I have seen, just kind of quickly around the league and stuff, I feel like you and Rick call a very straight game. Like you guys are pretty balanced when you call the game. And I've seen Oilers fans online say that you guys are big Flames fans and stuff. But would you say that I'm right in my assessment there?
We try to be very balanced, and I know like this is a hot topic, in not only in hockey but in every sport. That whichever team you cheer for, you seem to think the other team, the announcers are biased. But the fact of the matter is, Jackson, I'm not a Flames employee, and it makes my job a whole lot easier when they're winning. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really affect my life one way or the other, right? So I just call a game as I see it. And I try to stay very positive in most cases about what I'm seeing and what I'm calling. But I understand how fans get that way. But frankly, I appreciate you saying that we pretty much toe the line.
Yeah. And related to that, do you think that because you didn't play for the Flames during your career, does that sort of help you stay balanced?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think there must be a little bit of bias if you've been in that organization before. And I also think there'd have to be bias if you were employed by the organization. And some broadcasters are, right? So Rick and I are not. And so that makes it a lot easier for us to do our job and to say what we want to. I was quite proud. Rick and I did a national game, 2-3 weeks ago, Calgary and Edmonton.
Right.
And I had a number of Oiler fans reach out to me on social media and say, thanks, they appreciated the well-balanced broadcast. So when people do that, I take note of that. It means something to me.
One thing I've always been curious about is what is it like to go on a road trip as a broadcaster? And obviously you have experience as a player and now as a broadcaster doing that. So like if the Flames are going to California, what's that like for you?
Okay, so I can only speak pre-pandemic because pandemic changed everything and we stopped traveling and it's only starting to open up. In fact, I have a road trip coming up at the end of April with the Flames. They're going to Nashville, Minnesota, and Winnipeg. And that finishes off their regular season. And we have asked the Flames if Rick and I are allowed to go on the charter, which we used to do a ton before. We don't have that answer yet. But I can tell you, traveling with the team is so much easier. It's a healthy way to sort of maintain a relationship with everybody in the organization, and in particular, have a conversation with some of the players. Rick and I leave everybody alone, but it's on a small plane, right? So you're going to have contact with everybody, and it's nice to sort of have a chance to say hi and see how everybody's doing. But I only hesitate because my job is different than Rick. So because of my dual role with Hockey Night in Canada, I would most likely only be on about 30% of their charters. And oftentimes I'd go to Toronto Sunday if they're on the road, then I'd fly from Toronto to wherever they may be, meet the team, maybe join them on one more charter. You know, for instance, if I'm going to LA and then their next game is in San Jose on a Thursday, I'll fly with them after the LA game. But Friday, I'll get back on a plane, Air Canada plane, and go all the way back to Toronto. Then I may go on the road and meet the Flames again. And so my charter experience would be less than Rick's. He would be at an advantage in that way that he can spend more time. But I really love it. And the quality or the treatment is amazing. It's just so, the food you get is phenomenal. And the experience to talk to people like Brad Treliving or the coaches and it's really cool. I love it, and I miss it.
And now this is an observation I've made, sort of going from the road to home now. Yeah. But when I go to Flames games, like my seats are in the press level, so at the very top of the building. Sure. And for those who haven't been to Calgary, the Saddle Dome has this curved roof, and at the highest point are the press boxes where the TV and radio people called the game, and it's basically a big metal cage that's screwed into the roof. Yep. So you're floating way up over the ice calling the game. I've always thought it must be a little nerve-wracking to sit up there being that high up.
You know, that's a great question. And I'm not going to reveal names, but over the course of years, some of my friends in the business have a fear of heights. And so it's hard for them. Mm-hmm. I know one person that is a fantastic broadcaster, and the ability for him to do a game rinkside was a whole lot easier than it was to be in the press box. Right. Now, I don't have a fear of heights, although, you know, when you're walking in part of that cage, it's really high and you're right over center ice. And so that takes a little bit of getting used to. But where our broadcast booth is, it's terrific. Our view, we're basically looking right over the ice. We're just, about 10 feet behind the penalty boxes. Mm-hmm. And so we've got a fantastic view of the ice. And the only time that you might have a problem where we're situated is if there's a player coming out of the penalty box and he happens to touch the puck before he's entirely out, we can't see that. Right. We can't see his skate. So that's the only place that I think our vision is blocked.
Okay, yeah. And I love the Saddle Dome because it's so quirky and it's got character and history that you don't really see from newer arenas. But out of curiosity, what are some of your favorite arenas to watch a game?
There are many. I love Montreal, the Bell Center. Mm-hmm. The sight lines are terrific. LA for me, I know I'm smiling and you probably don't know why, but the TV broadcast booths are much lower. They're actually in the stands. They've built them in a certain area, but it's the coldest rink in the NHL. Oh. It's freezing, and you wouldn't think you're right in that arena and that it's absolutely freezing. I like Dallas. Again, that's not a traditional broadcast location, but we're closer to the ice. I haven't been to the brand new one for the New York Islanders, but the old Coliseum that they refurbished, where I used to play, that was terrific. Man, there's so many that it's hard to identify all of them because they're all, as kind of what you said about the Saddle Dome, every arena is a little bit quirky, right? Mm-hmm. And some of the newer ones, I think, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus here, it would be safe to say that the broadcast location is not ideal. We're too far away from the ice, and it makes it very, very difficult. You know, the buildings are beautiful, but it makes it very difficult to see the ice and the play develop and so on. So, and also, frankly, to see the numbers. I mean, we try and memorize all the players' numbers and the names, and that can be very tricky if you're having a really hard time just even seeing the number.
Yeah. And, the majority of NHL games I've been to have been at the Saddle Dome. But I've seen the Flames play twice at Rogers Place in Edmonton. Yeah. And 2 weeks from now when we're recording this episode, not when it's released, but I'll be going to Seattle to see the Flames play there. Oh, that's
a great building.
Yeah. And I'm really curious to see what that'll be like watching a game in the U.S. because I haven't been to a game out of Alberta. So.
You're going to love it. That's a great building. I've been there once. At the end of December, the Flames were there, and I was blown away. the architecture of that building is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the viewing experience is great. The broadcast location is fantastic. And it's also nice to go to a different city, right? I hadn't been to Seattle since my junior days, which is in the 70s, I guess, last time, or 80s when I was last in Seattle. So it was really cool to see the very first Starbucks. I went down and grabbed a coffee from there.
And
the
market.
Yes, exactly. So it was really fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got family out there.
Okay,
so
cool.
I've been to Seattle many times.
Yeah, right?
Over the
Nice.
years. Yeah. There we go. I wanted to bring up your book, Calling the Shots. I really enjoyed it. I read it a few years ago.
Okay.
And I've never met anyone that's written a book.
Oh, okay.
So what was the process like of putting this together?
Yeah, Kirsty McClellan Day and I had known each other, I'm going to say ballpark, about 8 or 10 years before we got together to do this book. And the timing was right. I'd been asked a number of times after I retired from the game to write a book, and just didn't think the opportunity was there, or I needed, I guess, distance from the game to get more clarity, because I think sometimes if you're not far enough removed, you might have different bias or different feelings. And once you move away from the game for a while, then you can, I think, sometimes see things clearer the older you get. So then when she and I started to collaborate on this, I didn't recognize how grueling it was going to be. I believe it was in the summer of 2017, in the spring. And so, as you know, Jackson, the playoffs are underway.
Right.
And so we got started before the playoffs started, and then it comes to a bit of a halt in the playoffs because I'm just so darn busy, right?
Yeah.
And I felt guilty about that because there are deadlines that Kirsty has to meet for HarperCollins to get to part of the book in time and to screen it and read it and things like that. And so we got stalled a little bit. And then once the playoffs end, I'm exhausted. And so Kirsty was really good working with, because she allowed me some time to regroup and clear my head and get some rest. And then when we went at it again, it was really intense. We'd go, her and her husband, her late husband, Larry Day, they own Pyramid Productions. And so I'd go down to the offices and we would meet, I can't remember how often, but we'd meet for about 45 minutes to an hour. More than that, and it's exhausting because you're revealing a lot about your life, right?
Right, yeah.
And so once we really got a real good grasp of the majority of the book, then we started meeting at her house. And it was kind of really nice because we'd sit outside and, it just feels really good. And then we hammered out the end. And the last chapter, I'm not sure if you recall it, Jackson, but the last chapter, the book was almost put to bed. And I thought long and hard about this, and we were meeting maybe for the last time until the final proofread. And I got all emotional. I said, Kirsty, I think we should sit down. I've got one more story to tell you. And so I shared my mental health issues that I didn't really recognize until our daughter Caitlin had mental health issues. And then when I look back on my life in 92, 93, when I really struggled in LA, I recognized that wasn't something, I wasn't struggling with confidence or anything. I had mental health issues. And for me to share that with Kirsty was very, very emotional. She wrote the chapter in no time. Like, she just hammered it out. And I was really impressed. And then I was meeting actually Caitlin, our youngest, and Donna at Earl's in West Hills, and I had the transcript. And I showed that to them, that chapter. And they were kind of blown away because at that point in my life, I was kind of embarrassed, I guess, to share and talk about it because most men were like that.
Right.
And now I'm happy to say that most men are sharing their thoughts.
Yeah, that's great. And now kind of coming back around to the music side of the show, a cool thing you talk about in the book was that you had a nickname given by Wayne Gretzky and Brent Sutter.
That's right.
Which was Tunes.
Yep.
Because you were a big music guy. I guess you kind of mentioned like hearing music at parties and stuff.
Yeah.
I always like to ask guests, like, what was the first song or album that you remember hearing that made you take music seriously?
I think, we could only buy 78s.
Right.
Because we couldn't afford a real album until a little bit later. But I remember Elvis Presley. I think the one song that I really loved at that time was In the Ghetto.
Oh, yeah.
And there were other Elvis songs played in our house. Wild Eyes by the Stampeders, for some reason. That one really stands out to me.
Some Canadian stuff.
Yes,
there,
Canadian stuff. And then Queen, I really started to get into their music. And of course, when I really started to really love music, I'm going to go back. So when I was this was still in the 60s, so I'm not even a teenager yet. Mm-hmm. I remember I listened to Grand Funk Railroad. I don't know if you've heard of it yet. And they had a live album. And I can't remember the drummer's name, but man, he was incredible. And so I'd go in our garage and I'd get some cardboard boxes and I'd kind of set them up.
Right.
And I can't remember what I used for drumsticks. Might have been spoons or something. I'd go play away in my own brain, right? My own little world, and picture being a rock star. And so that was cool. And then finally, when I really got into it, it would have been bands like Kiss and the Eagles that really stood out to me.
Okay, yeah. And you talked about, also going back to the book, how you had a ritual the night before, like when you were on the road, where you would play a CD of your favorite songs. What sort of songs would be on that CD?
Well, it would have been Your Buddy that you're wearing, the Tom Petty, Damn the Torpedoes. So I played a lot of Petty at those times. Again, Springsteen, Eagles, Don Henley. Don Henley, the band had broken up, and so there was a lot of Henley individual stuff. Man, there was a Cher. I liked Cher early on. Well, not early on, but I remember her from her Sonny and Cher TV show, and I thought she was great. So that would have been in my Islander days. I played a lot of that in bed. Just anything that was kind of I could connect to.
Yeah.
Inspirational, but I could connect to. Melancholy. I like songs, that have a sadness, but more depth. There's like a story why it's sad, if that makes sense. And so, I have such a vast range. I'm, last little while, I've moved into some country that I really, really like. And it's just, I'm so happy because I have so many different genres that I can listen to. So when Donna goes to bed at night, I usually sit in my favorite chair, have a glass of red wine, and I YouTube and I explore and go all over the place. And so don't ask me who my latest, what's her, Brandy Carr, here, I have it right here in my music. I wanted to look this because she's amazing. Carly Pearce, just phenomenal. Some of the greatest songwriting, and she's got a beautiful voice. On Saturdays, often now, after the show's over, in particular when I wasn't traveling to Toronto, I'd watch a great Grand Ole Opry and see all those acts. So you can see from my what I'm saying, I'm all over the map.
Yeah, that's good. And I've also read Wayne Gretzky's book, 99 Stories of the Game, which is a great resource for anyone that wants to learn about like the history of hockey.
Yes.
But in the book, Wayne was talking about like being in the Oilers locker room and how music was like a very important tool for like bonding amongst teammates.
Cool. I like it.
And I have to imagine that's a pretty common thing you see in any NHL locker room.
It is, although there can be, people that want certain sort of songs and different genres and so on. Does Wayne mention, because I don't want to share something that he doesn't want shared, does he share who he may have enjoyed, the bands?
Well, I seem to remember he was talking about like Springsteen.
Okay.
But the one that stood out to me was, I think it was Kevin Lowe really wanted to play Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Oh, okay, cool.
And the rest of the team was like, okay, yeah, but he's kind of, it's not exactly our thing. But
okay. Well, I remember teammates loving ABBA. And, just fantastic artists, but it just surprised me that would be in the NHL dressing room. But,
totally, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I've been watching the NHL since I was like 7, I would say. And there's always been music at games as long as I've been going.
Yeah.
But, you go back far enough and it's like, it's just organ. Like it's just the organist playing. Yeah. But like when you're starting with the Islanders, for example, in the early 80s, was it mostly just organ or was there other songs playing?
No, I think it was just organ.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I remember it was because in 87 we won a big playoff game at home, and kind of strangely enough, one of the interviews I had to do about the impact that the organist had on the outcome of the game.
Wow.
So
yeah.
So just different thoughts, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I was wondering, like, I guess probably by the end of your career, they were like playing other
Oh,
songs.
sure. Yeah, totally.
Were there any songs on the ice that would ever get you like really pumped up, or were you just so focused on the game that
Revolution by the Beatles.
Nice.
That one still every time I hear it just blows me away. But that one, there are certain songs, and Revolution was one of them because you know my love of music. I had to sort of guard against letting that emotion of that song get the best of me.
Right.
Because it, for me, I can't speak for all people or all athletes, but it gives me a jolt of adrenaline. And sometimes you need it and sometimes you don't. Sometimes a jolt of adrenaline is too much because you're already in a zone, right? You don't need more. That's when your home fans are cheering, or even the visiting fans, and you've got to really sort of find a way to step back or out of yourself a little bit because the emotion just gets too high. But Revolution for me was just and they played it in the Great Western Forum. It seems like once a night, maybe not that often, and that was just a special one for me.
Yeah, that's one song that I've never bothered learning on guitar because I don't think I'll ever get that tone on that song.
That seems so hard, right?
Yeah, but for me, when I'm at Flames games, it's like AC/DC, any AC/DC song, and Raise a Little Hell by Trooper.
Okay,
if
great.
I hear those,
right?
I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Now you get to experience that, but we don't as broadcasters, right? Because we've got the headset on and we're talking, and you know, we're working with our production people to what's going to go to air next, and so I don't get that experience.
Right. Yeah. And in your book, I was really fascinated about your time with the Kings because being in LA at that time would have been like such a whirlwind to be a part of, because you got there right when the team really sort of took off. Getting Wayne Gretzky just totally changed them from being kind of a second-rate franchise in LA to being like a big show in town. And it's it's kind of crazy to be a part of that, because really besides LA, maybe Toronto and the Rangers are the only other teams that get that kind of glitzy following that the Kings do. Yeah,
it was weird. Meeting a lot of not only celebrities but musicians that I greatly admired, and having my picture taken with them after games, and then having conversations with them about things. It was just weird. As you know, I've mentioned a bunch of times my love of the Eagles, and when the Hell Freezes Over tour started back up in '94, they played 4 consecutive shows at the Irvine Amphitheater.
Okay.
And so we went on night 2 and night 4. And the first night we went, we were invited backstage during the intermission. That was, everything is a weird experience, because growing up in Edmonton, and I wanted to be a park warden. I had no idea that hockey was going to get in the way, and this was going to be my life, right? I had no idea. And so you're backstage, and there's a million celebrities, and I'm not sure. Do you know who Irving Azov is?
Yeah, he's the
manager, right? Yeah. So he's there, and he comes over and says hi to us, and hope you're enjoying the show. And just these, I'm thinking to myself, I look at Don, and I'm like, wow, that is just ridiculous that guy even knows who I am.
Yeah.
And so just, I remember driving home many nights and saying to Don, I just can't believe, this guy. Glenn Frey one time comes up to me and says, Kelly, I'm a big fan. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, you probably don't know the fan I am of your band. So it was just weird.
Yeah. I never, I saw the Eagles in Calgary in 2018.
Yep.
So that's post Glenn's death there.
Yes.
So I never got to see the band with the original lineup there, but they were still great.
Oh my gosh, right? And so was Vince Gill a part of that concert?
Vince Gill, and then Glenn's son, Deacon.
Yes, exactly, right? Yeah.
I was just happy to see Joe Walsh because I'm a huge fan of his. So
phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of Vince Gill. I just think his voice it blows me away.
Yeah. And
he's a great guitar player.
He is, yeah. And talking about celebrities in the locker room, like in the book, there's pictures of you with Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell, John Candy. And you became friends with John McEnroe, the tennis player. And
I know what story you're getting to.
Yeah, I was going to say you were at his birthday party.
I was. So anyways, I had met Bruce Springsteen before, and it was interesting. Bruce Springsteen, we had a bad game at home, and Tom Webster was our coach, and he typically back then, I don't know how it is now. Hopefully it's a little bit different, but coach would come in and say that he's not happy or whatever, and you've got to do this better and whatever. And sometimes they get a little bit angry. And I remember Bruce Springsteen was standing right beside our owner, Bruce McDowell, and with Bruce was Jimmy Iovine.
Right.
And so the three of them are right there, but it's kind of in a corner. I don't know if I'm going to explain this properly, but they can't see the front of the room where they're situated, but I'm literally about 3 feet away from them. And Tom Webster comes in and he says, "Hey guys," and then Bruce Springsteen says to me, I don't know if he knew who I was or he saw my nameplate above. He goes, "Kelly, can I stand here?" Because he was afraid that, we're going to get hacked and he's going to be in there. He won't be.
Right.
Tom Webster can't see him, but Bruce didn't want to sort of overstep his boundaries. So I said, no, you're good right there. Stay there. So Tom finishes, and then I looked over at Bruce and Jimmy, and they took it inside. That must be how a band works, right? That you have confrontation sometimes because you weren't as sharp as you needed to be, and
right.
And so they certainly weren't surprised by the conversation. Then Bruce came over and started chatting, and it was really cool. And then that would have been like, I don't know, 91, 92, something like that. And then this is like a personal thing, I got really kind of shy, and that may be part of my mental health stuff. And so we were invited to John and Tatum's house for his birthday party, and there's only like 9 people, right? There's like Bruce Willis and Eddie and Alec Van Halen, Valerie Bertinelli. There's a couple pro tennis players, and there's Bruce Springsteen. And Don and I were just in the backyard, and I didn't have the nerve to go up and say hi again to Bruce. Yeah. And I always kind of regretted it. Like, why was I... we had a good time at the party, but it was just ridiculous that I wouldn't have gone over, right?
Yeah. Well, I was literally gonna say that because I think you could have done that.
Of course.
I would have been probably more intimidated by like Bruce Willis.
Okay, yeah.
But I would go and talk to Springsteen because he's just really down to earth. Like,
yes.
My agent is a guy named Eugene Foley.
Okay,
and
I read this earlier today.
Right. Yeah, and he was on the first episode of
cool.
This podcast.
I got to go back and listen. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he promotes my music for me, and he gets me opportunities. And while he also he helps up and coming artists like me, he also works with big names, and one of them is Bruce. Like he and Bruce have personally worked together on many projects. And Gene is originally from New Jersey.
Okay.
He doesn't live there anymore, but he was telling me how the first time he met Bruce was at PetSmart.
Oh, no way.
In the 90s there in New Jersey.
Okay.
And he was just there getting some things, and he bumps into Bruce, and Bruce was just there shopping as well. And they just kind of kept running into each other like that until they finally started working together. Yeah. But I think, if you can meet Bruce in a PetSmart, I think you could have just gone up to him.
Exactly.
And you weren't even a nobody, right? Like you could have said, "I'm the goalie for the Kings."
Right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Just weird experiences, and and for me, it was really cool to meet a lot of the actors and stuff, and they were so down to earth. The only ones that I thought were maybe a little bit harder to get to know were the younger ones, because they maybe had a little bit more attitude, but maybe they needed it to get into the business.
Right.
But the ones that were around for a long time, they were just like you and I, and just normal, right? It was so cool.
Yeah. And going back to Gene, though, he was really excited when I was telling him, like, I'm going to talk with Kelly on the show. Because he's a lifelong Islanders fan.
Oh, no way.
So he's like, "Oh, that's awesome. I know Kelly. That would be cool to talk to him." Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. What a small world, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you've met lots of while you were in LA, you met lots of people. And yeah, so who are some other musicians that you've got to meet and get to know a little more?
Yeah, you're gonna way too many. It's a really small world. Sports and musicians, they really blend well. And I don't know why. I've heard this said, and I think it's accurate. I know a lot of musicians wanted to be athletes and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so that's I have to tell you, I'm drawing a bit of a blank because you meet so many, especially in LA.
Right.
And you also do here because of Hockey Night in Canada. So you meet so many, and it's crazy. And I think that one of the things I want to go back, I've never met Bryan Adams. I know actually Gretzky's really good friends with Bryan.
Right.
But this is a strange thing. When I was playing for the Islanders at Union or Nassau Coliseum, I went to a Bryan Adams concert for the first time. In junior, I used to play his early albums, and it was just amazing. And so I see Bryan Adams, and the entire building is just rocking out, right? They just love Bryan Adams, and this is New York, and I'm thinking, I'm just a kid here, young kid in my 20s, playing for the Islanders, and to see the admiration the people had for Bryan Adams, it was a moment. I felt so proud to be Canadian.
Right.
Right. I'm like, wow. I knew Bryan Adams was a worldwide hit, but it didn't really sink in until I saw all these New Yorkers cheering for Bryan Adams.
Yeah.
And then I was 2 years later hear a bunch of stories from Wayne. So that was really cool.
And it's funny you bring up Bryan, but on the second episode of the podcast, I interviewed Jim Valance.
Oh, yeah, I saw that as well, yeah.
Who's Bryan's co-writer.
Yes.
So, yeah, got some good Bryan stories on
I
this
can
podcast.
imagine, right? And they're how they write. By the way, I was one of your drummers was the drummer for Mellencamp.
Kenny Aronoff.
Yes, and I read an article and just his story. What really blew me away from the article I read is that the dedication that band had to being perfect, right? They had when they weren't on tour, as you know, I'm not telling you, I'm telling the people listening.
Yeah.
I had no idea that even when they weren't on tour, they had practice sessions every single day from 11 to 11. They only had a 2-hour block from 5 to 7 to get a bite to eat and all that. And they did it every day. And as Kenny said in the article, they weren't the best musicians, but they worked harder.
Yeah.
And I think they were at the very top, right? But it was kind of really cool to see what he was thinking. And Mellencamp has been a favorite of mine, and yeah.
I saw him in Lethbridge a couple of years ago. Yeah.
No way. That's cool.
Kind of a weird place to see him.
Right?
But yeah, he was touring through Canada, but he wasn't playing the big cities. He was just playing the small towns. So
did he have a band or just acoustic?
It was a band. It was
cool.
in the Lethbridge Hurricanes arena.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Now, before the next segment of the show,
yes.
I just quickly wanted to ask, and this is the local Calgary part of the podcast for those listening, but one area of interest that I love when looking at sort of the history of hockey in Calgary is in regards to the city's former arena, the Stampede Corral.
Sure.
Which they unfortunately torn down about a year ago now. But I got to spend a lot of time in the Corral. I saw hockey in there. My high school graduation was in there.
Oh, wow.
But and I even wrote a story about the history of it while I was taking journalism here at Mount Royal.
Okay.
But you would have played there with
sure
the
did.
Medicine Hat Tigers.
I sure did.
And every person I've talked with about the Corral has some crazy story about it. So I was just wondering if you have any memories playing there.
It was a wild place to play, and I remember it didn't affect me at all, but the boards were the highest you'd ever seen. And I know players have always talked about it, that the boards might have been as high as 5 feet tall, and the bench was tiered. I think it had 3 tiers because it wasn't long enough, and so the only way you could fit all the players on was to tier it, and then you'd come off and go make it to the top tier, and then your line of eventually make its way to the front of the bench. You know what I loved most about the Corral? The pictures.
Yes.
I would walk around that arena and look at the pictures because I love hockey history. I'm not a hockey historian, but I love the history of the hockey, and I know quite a bit of history, but that was just phenomenal to me. And then I would see pictures when they were in the WHA.
Right.
And people like Don Smokey McLeod and other players that played a little bit before me, and I just love that part of every arena I go into in today's world, and not a lot of them have pictures anymore.
Yeah.
But I still love that, going around the arena and finding where they have certain memorabilia on the walls.
Totally, yeah. And my uncle has some crazy stories. Like he saw the Flames play there when they first moved, and he was like right next to like Dave Keon and Brian Trottier and
totally.
And he one time had a Lethbridge Broncos player throw a helmet at him.
That's Junior, yep.
Yeah. And it's sort of a cool music story to tie it all back together. But when I saw The Who in Calgary in 2016, Pete Townsend was telling a story about the first time the band played in Calgary, which was on their first North American tour in 1967.
Seriously.
And they played in the Corral during Stampede.
Yeah.
And he said, when we got up on stage, it smelled really funny. And what they had done is they had shoveled in all the horse shit and put it under the stage.
Right, exactly. I'd forgotten about The Who. That was one of my early favorite bands, and they had a double album called Quadrophenia.
Yep.
And that was really my go-to for about a year. I just loved that album.
For sure, yeah.
Rain Over Me, that song, Roger Daltrey belting that one out, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, they're one of my favorite bands too. So, yeah. This episode of Guess That Record is sponsored by Marvel Marketing. Marvel Marketing is a full-service digital marketing agency headquartered in Calgary, Alberta, that creates digital impact for your company. To find out more, visit marvelmarketing.ca. All right, Kelly, it is now time to enter the guessing portion of this podcast.
Time to get nervous, right?
I'll go over the rules for you and any new listeners.
Okay.
So I have a bag down here.
Okay.
And inside the bag is an album that I pulled from my collection. So I'll give you 3 clues about the album.
Okay.
And then you have to ask me 15 or up to 15 yes or no questions to determine the identity of the album.
Okay.
And as a tip, you can ask questions like off the bat, like, Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix? But if all your questions are just guessing album names, you might run out of questions.
Right, okay.
So, Kelly Hrudey, are you ready to guess that record?
I hope so. I hope I do it right, and I hope I understand the rules.
Okay. Here are your 3 clues. This album came out in the 1980s. It had, astonishingly, 7 singles reach the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100, and one of those singles caused controversy. Question 1.
Okay, I have to try and get my time frame here. The 80s. Was the lead singer a male?
Yes. Question 2.
Oh, boy. Did the band have 4 members?
They had more than 4 members.
More than 4.
Mm-hmm. Question 3.
Did they play rock and roll?
They did. Question 4.
My mind is taking me into the 70s. I got to think in the 80s. Was this their first album?
It was not their first album. Question 5.
Let me think here. Was the song that had controversy, was it played on the radio?
It was. It was a big hit.
Okay.
Yeah. Question 6.
Was the song somehow related to occult or?
No. Question 7.
Holy cow, you've got me stumped already.
Well, I'll give you a hint here. You've met this artist.
Okay. Well, Bruce Springsteen.
It is Bruce Springsteen.
And which it would have been Born in the USA, of course. Well, thank you for that. Yeah.
As I pull it out.
Oh my gosh!
Congratulations, Kelly.
Look at that.
It was Born in the USA.
Okay.
And that copy that I just pulled out there was originally my dad's copy.
No way.
That he bought back in the day, but it's in my collection now. So.
And I know we're gonna go on, but can you give me 3 or 4 of your favorite songs from that?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna go over that later, actually.
Okay.
But my 5 favorite are probably "Dancing in the Dark," "No Surrender,"
yeah,
"Bobby Jean," "Cover Me,"
yeah,
and "My Hometown."
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I mean, I just love "Dancing in the Dark."
Courtney Cox in the video.
Courtney Cox, yeah. And it's funny with "Dancing in the Dark" because that was his highest charting single. It hit number 2 on Billboard. And it was kept off the top spot by "When Doves Cry" by Prince.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which annoys...
2 great songs.
Yeah, which annoys my dad so much because he thought it was the number 1. Right. And he was like, how is that possible? And it's funny because the only song that Bruce has written that hit number 1 was Manfred Mann's version of "Blinded by the Light."
Yep, right. Isn't that?
It's kind of weird to think how he's had such a prolific career, but he hasn't had a number one song.
I was blown away by that, and I found it somewhere, and that Bruce was singing it, and it just seemed weird.
It does,
right?
Yeah.
Because most people don't associate that with him, right? But wow.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with Born in the USA, Cover Me. Now, Cover Me was kind of weird to me. Not weird. I really related to that, not for Bruce's stardom, but I was becoming a tiny bit more popular, and it was kind of a word or song for me. Like I wanted my beautiful wife Donna to sort of protect me from the outside, right?
He wrote that, I believe, for Donna Summer.
Oh, cool.
But John Landau, Bruce's manager, said, keep it.
Oh, is that right, eh?
And it was a top 10 hit, so yeah.
Wow. Downbound Train and I'm on Fire and My Hometown.
Yeah.
Cool.
I also brought, I have some more Born in the USA memorabilia here. I've got a 12-inch single here of Cover Me. It's perfect. Cool. We were talking about that.
That is cool.
Yeah. And probably the weirdest thing I have, but this is a 12-inch single box set that was only available in the UK. So it's got like a bunch of the singles. It's got I'm Going Down here, the 45 of
Love
it,
that, yeah.
which wasn't available in England, so this was why it was in here. Then you've got a 12-inch single of Dancing in the Dark.
Okay.
The Cover Me one.
Yeah.
Glory Days.
Yeah.
And I'm on Fire.
Oh my gosh.
But and it also had a poster, which is why I bought it, because I wanted the poster. So
I love posters back then.
Yeah, I framed the poster. But yeah, and I figured it would be perfect to pick a Springsteen album because because you've sort of rubbed shoulders with him, but and you also told me before the podcast that you were a fan of his. So
yeah, I exchanged that.
Yeah.
So the controversy, was it the Born in the USA song?
Yes.
Yes. I figured.
And we will get to that.
Okay.
I wanted to give some facts about the album for those unfamiliar with it. Born in the USA is the 7th studio album by Bruce Springsteen. Released on June 4th, 1984, it turned Springsteen into a global superstar. The album featured 7 singles that hit the top 10 of the Billboard charts, which was one of the clues. And it's one of the best-selling albums of all time with 30 million copies sold.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So when looking at when this album came out, you would have been right at the start of your career with the Islanders. So do you have any memories of like hearing it when it was coming out?
When did it come out exactly?
84.
But what month?
June 84.
Okay, that makes tons of sense because I had been playing it a lot in the summer, but I remember getting ready for training camp, and I was driving from Edmonton to Medicine Hat to see Donna's family, I think, for our final goodbye before the start of the season. And I remember playing it over and over and over again, much to the Donna hates that when I play songs over and over and over, right?
Right.
But I love it.
Yeah.
And so she's gotten used to it over these, 30, 40 years that we've been together. But I just remember, and there was a connection I had with Cover Me, but Born in the USA was kind of, I can understand the controversy because it was, anti-American and anti-war. And I just thought it was so well written. And I met a girl in K-Saw, or no, he met a girl in K-Saw. Is that?
Had a brother at K-Saw.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And about meeting the girl, and now he's all gone, and just so many things about it. I could sort of paint the picture in my head. Exactly.
And it's sort of interesting for you because as Bruce became this huge star, you were in Long Island, which is you're more in Billy Joel's territory there.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's still very close to Bruce in New Jersey. Yeah. So were you seeing the same kind of scenes that are in these songs like while you were out there?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so, again, that's sort of the picture you sort of create in your own head, right? So I think, and that's also with the lyrics. I think all of us interpret lyrics differently and what they mean to us and how we can relate.
Yeah.
And so I definitely saw that. I saw Billy Joel at the Nassau Coliseum again.
Right.
And just a phenomenal showman and just man, they love him there.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah, he's from Oyster Bay, I believe.
Well, we drove by his house one time. We found out where it was, and at the time, I don't know if he still owns that property, but it was right on the North Shore overlooking the Long Island Sound, and it was just an amazing property.
Yeah, yeah. Now, going back to Bruce, this might be my favorite Springsteen album, and it's basically between this and Darkness on the Edge of Town for me, but Born in the USA, in my opinion, is one of those like perfect albums where every single song is like great. It's all killer, no filler, as I would say. This album is very divisive amongst the Springsteen fan base because a lot of his longtime fans felt like he sort of sold out with this album. Because there were people that had been following him since, or like when he was a nobody playing the Stone Pony in Asbury Park.
Yep.
And now he was playing in these huge stadiums with people who hadn't heard of him until this album came out. And his image at the time was also divisive because when you sort of look at him a few years before that, he was kind of this like scrawny looking street rat.
Yeah.
But then he hit the gym hard. And then by the time he's in doing Born in the USA, he's this big muscle bound action movie looking guy, you know. And even Bruce is a bit unsure about his feelings towards the album. But yeah, so like where does it sort of stand amongst your favorite Springsteen album?
Yeah, I'm hesitating because I just absolutely loved it. I'm going to Tunnel of Love was something that I just absolutely loved from the moment I heard the first song. And to me, there was a depth to it. That I could sort of, again, create those same visuals for myself.
Right.
And I could kind of relate to a lot of that stuff. And so that one is one that really stood out to me. And then there were two consecutive albums, Human Touch.
Right. And Lucky Town.
Yeah. And by the way, those two albums were played a lot in our dressing room with the LA Kings.
Well, and that was when he was in LA at that time.
Yes, it was. Yeah. And I know there was a lot of people that didn't like those albums, and he wasn't with the E Street Band at that time. And Paul Coffey loved those albums, and so when he was with us, he played those a lot after games and before games. But there was a song on, I'm not sure if it's Human Touch, I'm going to pull it up, a song called Soul Driver.
Right.
And a song called Real World. Now, those two songs, why those stood out to me, and they're crafted differently on this album, but about a year before this album came out, or these albums came out, Don and I went to the Shrine Auditorium, and we saw Bonnie Raitt, Jackson Browne, and Bruce Springsteen. They each had their own set. It was an acoustic concert.
Right.
And then the three of them played 3 encores. And Bruce played those two songs, Soul Driver and Real World. And acoustically, it's just stunning. It is just, those two songs, to me, put him as a singer and a songwriter in a different level. Even though I had thought he was already at the top, that just changed my world. And still to this day, when I YouTube Bruce, I usually try and find a new version of those two songs because they're kind of haunting to me, in a great way.
Yeah, totally. And as I mentioned in one of the clues, Born in the USA, the song, caused controversy. And it's really one of the most like scathing critiques about America that you can find in a song. And it's a really brilliant piece how it has such a powerful message hidden behind this big pop anthem.
Right.
And of course, that message went over so many people's heads. And to this day, many conservatives think it's this pro-American song.
100% they do.
Yeah. And it's quite the contrast how Bruce's image at the time and the music seemingly fits right in with that kind of Reagan-era patriotism and manliness. But it's got very radical themes in the songs. Like the lyrical content doesn't match that at all. And Ronald Reagan actually started talking about Bruce at that time when he was campaigning.
And he wanted to include the song.
Yeah, and Bruce kind of had to say, like, I'm not on your team.
Yes, You're not allowed to play that song.
Yeah.
No matter how much money you're willing to pay me.
Yeah. And when you look at because obviously it's about a veteran returning home after Vietnam.
Yeah.
The album really is almost kind of like one of the first post-Vietnam albums, because by the 80s, Americans were finally starting to talk about what happened in the war.
Yeah.
And, you have albums like Born in the USA, The Nylon Curtain by Billy Joel, Copperhead Road, Steve Earle.
For sure. Yeah.
And movies like Platoon, were all coming out around this time where, people were starting to finally sort of talk about the war in popular culture. And I also think the tour for Born in the USA was fantastic as well. The E Street Band, of course, added Niels Lofgren and Bruce's future wife, Patti Scaffa.
That's right.
It ran from June 84 to October 85, and the album was in the top 10 for that entire run, which is crazy.
And the big man, Clarence Clemens was, as popular as Bruce to a certain degree.
I have a recording from that tour here on CD.
Wow.
It is one of his shows from the Brendan Byrne Arena in 1984 venue I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Played in that building many, many times.
Yeah, and the energy from the show is just through the roof. 3 hours long, 3 discs.
Right. So we, Don and I, and Greg Gilbert and his wife Tammy, we went to Jersey, not to see it at the Brendan Byrne, but to see Bruce at Giant Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. 80,000 people, right? And that's in his backyard.
Yeah.
And so it was just amazing. And, that must have been 3 hours also, that concert. And I just couldn't believe his energy.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal.
Is that the same tour then?
It would have been.
Okay, wow.
It would have been different time of year because we would have gone in the summer. And
he played the big stadiums at the end of the tour, so I think this was the first half of that tour. But,
my gosh. Atlantic City and Johnny 99, I love those.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And Bruce really had a great trilogy of tours because you can't go wrong with any show from the Darkness tour of 78, the River tour of 1980, and Born in the USA.
Yeah.
And from what I've heard, Bruce should be going on tour again next year.
I saw that. I read that.
Yeah, which I will be making the pilgrimage to see him somewhere.
Do you know where?
I don't know yet, but I'm going to see him because...
Have you seen him yet?
I haven't.
Oh, my gosh. It's amazing. We have seen him many, many times. And every show is a little bit different because, as you know, he likes to play a different version of a lot of songs over the course of time. He changes it up. And, we saw him at the Great Western Forum again with that Human Touch tour.
Right.
And with that brand new band.
Yeah.
And, man, were they rocking back then. Like, he was trying to put a stamp on his career. Like, I'm not with the E Street Band right now, but we're still good.
Yeah, exactly.
He got some great musicians to play.
I know he did take Roy Bittan, the piano player, with him.
Yeah.
He was the only E Street member to go with him on that tour.
Yeah.
And, he's one of the best piano players.
Yeah,
so
by far, right?
Makes sense,
Yeah.
My final thoughts on the album, when you look at it, it really kind of ends the original era of Bruce and the E Street Band. It was the last album made by the classic lineup of the band, as Steven Van Zandt left following the recording of the album. And Bruce never really made another album in the studio, in my opinion, that has that kind of bombastic energy to it that they had from like Born to Run through to this album. And I kind of wish they made another record in the style of Born in the USA, because I do enjoy Tunnel of Love, but I kind of like the sound of Born in the USA a bit more.
Yeah, sure.
But of course, Tunnel of Love was kind of a reaction to the hype of Born in the USA, so he wanted it to be a bit more quiet. But really, Born in the USA is like one of the best mixes of rock and pop. And so for that reason, it's a huge influence on my own music.
And that's cool because you're, 23 years old?
23, yeah.
That's quite the statement for a young person like you to have an album. You weren't born, of course, and to have that sort of impact. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often, right? Like, I love music, but most people that I really, really follow, I had to be alive
Right.
to really get into them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just because when I was a kid, I discovered the Beatles and then just kind of went from there. And that the older stuff just speaks to me more. It just makes more sense to me. So
Okay, I like that.
Well, we've reached the end of another episode of Guess That Record. I want to thank Kelly Hrudey for taking the time to be on the show. It was really cool to get to talk with you and about your career and your interest in music. So thanks for being here.
It's been my pleasure. Like I told you, I was quite nervous coming here, but I had a great time, Jackson. This is really cool, and I would like to do it again somewhere down the road, right?
That would be awesome, yeah. And I just want to let everyone know that this is the final episode of our first season of Guess That Record. The show's going to be going on a hiatus for a little while, but that doesn't mean it's over. I'm going to be working hard to find more guests so that we can have even more episodes in the future. I want to thank Eugene Foley, Jim Valance, Hank Steamer, Mitchell Brady and the Static Shift, and Kelly Hrudey for taking the time out of their busy schedules to be our first guests. Their involvement has really helped get this idea of mine off the ground. For the listeners that stuck with us for this first season, thank you so much for tuning in every week. And thanks to any new listeners that are hopping on board with us right now. You guys make it possible for the show to keep going, so I sincerely want to thank each and every one of you for all the support. Make sure to leave a review wherever you're listening, and if you have any friends that like music, get them to check us out. You can also follow us on Instagram at Guess That Record. And as I always say, remember to keep rocking, and we'll see you on the next season of Guess That Record.